All right, Mr. Bernstein, kick us off.
Hey all, it is Sunday, April 28th, and this is Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox. If you'd like to find out about future Tinderbox meetups, sign up at eastgate.com and visit the Tinderbox forum for announcements at forum.eastgate.com. And now here's Michael Becker.
Hey, everybody, welcome. So our typical Tinderbox format is we go around the room and new people introduce themselves. We've got a small group today, and no one seems to be new. Although I don't think I've spent a lot of time with you, John, so maybe you can introduce yourself in just a minute. And then we dig in and we have people who have prepared demonstrations for us on, we call it working 10 minutes with Tinderbox or more if it takes a few extra minutes to give us the kind of demos and the projects we're working on. If anybody has any topics or challenges they're struggling with in terms of Tinderbox or generalized tools for thought, we can bring those up. And then if we have a theme, we'll jump into that theme. Like for example, on June 1st, and this is a new announcement, we're going to be having a friend of mine, Bry, AI, the product guy, talk about how he's overlaid large language models on top of Obsidian and all of the different plugins he's done with that. So I think that will be a really exciting discussion to have in the general concept of tools for thought. So let's keep an eye out for that June 1st model. And Mark, as we're talking about future talks, you mentioned that there's going to be a gentleman showing up today, possibly, or maybe not, and then a few coming in the future. Can you highlight some of those?
The next one is next week. We are scheduled to have a topical meeting on Saturday on Tinderbox and music. Subject on which I know remarkably little, but I am hoping to pull that together.
Okay, and then on June 1st, we're gonna have Bry the AI guy. And there was another one we were gonna have today that you were trying, or one you're trying
Dan
to pull together?
Alasso, who is a historian who wrote a dissertation with Tinderbox, has been doing other interesting Tinderbox things, but he and I have been having email troubles, and so that may have fallen through.
Okay,
I'm
and I'm sorry,
getting
what was his name again?
Dan Alasso, two L's, two S's.
Okay, okay. And anybody else that's on your topic or on your agenda right now?
That's what I know about.
Okay.
And Jim Fallows, when he gets back into the swing, we will reschedule.
And so on that note, anybody that's listening to this, if you're out there in the Tinderbox world or tools for thought world and you have thoughts or ideas that you want to come and contribute to the community, please reach out to myself or Mark Bernstein or Mark Anderson and let us know what you're working on and what you'd like to share with the community. On May 4th, by the way, Mark, just to call that out, I won't be there because that's my doctoral dissertation or doctoral graduation ceremony. So I will not be here.
Congratulations.
I will be somewhere else. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somewhere else in a quite literal sense, yes.
Yeah, somewhere else in a quite literal sense. So with that in mind, my understanding is we do have a few prepared conversations today. So Mr. Bernstein has a sneak peek on some work that he's been doing with the next future generation of Tinderbox. Detlef is going to be talking about OpenAI on top of Tinderbox. And Mr. Christie, I heard you've got something cool using Whisper. Are you prepared to share that with us today?
Sure.
All right. So we got a lot to cover this afternoon. So who wants to, and then John, do you want to kind of give us a brief introduction? I'm sure I might have met you before, but I don't think we've come across. Maybe you can say hi and let us know why you're here and what what you want to learn. John Cartmel? No?
Hi, sorry.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. It is evening here. I know it's probably a bit earlier for most of you. I'm essentially a new user. I actually purchased the software 18 months ago, but for various reasons, I hardly got any chance of using it. So I'm here to listen. I'm here to try and learn. I want to use it along with a whole host of other things for some presentations that I'm doing, mainly in the science area, for U3A group. This is old colleges like myself getting together and talking and doing a little bit of education stuff one to another, and also for family history. I do a whole lot of family history, and I want to use this sort of thing for researching and for putting things together, I'm hoping.
That sounds wickedly perfect, especially leveraging timeline and other linking tools within Tinderbox. That sounds really exciting. And when you said U3A group something, I didn't understand what that was. Your education part. What is it?
Sorry, U3A, University of Third Age. It is an international organization, but basically it's local retired people getting together and doing things. So in our local U3A, we have a family history group that I organize, a science group, a history group, and probably about a dozen others. So French conversation, and a whole lot of things like that.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the family and the community,
Thank
and we'd love to have you here. So as you progress along, maybe you'll be able to give us a presentation sometime on what you've uncovered and done. You're familiar, since you're new, are you familiar with our whole video library? We've been doing this now for a couple of years, these meetups. Are you familiar with the video links and the history of all of that? Have you found that resource yet? If not, Mr. Anderson, maybe you can grab the complete video list and drop it in the chat so John can grab it. That would be awesome. And then also, while you're at it, if you don't mind, can you drop in ATB ref? And actually, if you don't mind, Mark, why don't we start with that for John's benefit? If you can spend 5 minutes giving a quick overview of ATB ref and as a resource for new people and anyone else that happens to live doing this, and then we'll jump into Detlef and then Paul and then Mark Bernstein.
Okay, so just going in the chat now is rather longer ago than I care to mention. I'm the same side of the pond as you, John. I struck up with Tinderbox and was, like many, sort of seeing its many facets and wondering what to do. And someone kindly sent me a file, which I then fleshed out, and that became ATB ref. So for the last 20 odd years, I've been updating this site, which is sort of written as it's an outboard reference. It's not a manual. But the point is, if you're wondering how something works or what a button does, that's what it's really trying to cover. So there's a whole host of stuff there. If you tap out in the manual or in the tutorials, which I thoroughly advise looking at, there are 2 tutorials in the help menu of Tinderbox, which are easily overlooked, which are a quite useful way of getting started. There's a whole host of stuff. If you get stuck, tap up the forums. There are all sorts of different skills here, and somebody probably has either tripped over the problem before or might have a sensible idea as to where to go with things.
But having said that, though, Mark, I would also be careful. This is such a bleeding edge community. You will find sometimes you're doing something that no one's ever actually done before. Which
yes,
I think is important, and that's yeah.
Yeah, well, yes, and indeed, it's not necessarily even in bleeding edge. It's just you're doing something. If you think of Tinderbox as being like a Meccano set or an Erector set for those on the other side of the pond, there are lots of tools. You don't have to use every one. It's a bit like your kitchen drawer. You know, there were a plethora of things in there. But to make a dish, you don't use every single knife or every single spoon or whatever. And don't worry if you don't. And don't worry if there are people using parts of the application that you don't. It's the things it can do are many and varied, and some of them really are quite niche. So don't worry at all if you see long debates about something you don't understand. That is normal.
Yeah.
And don't feel bad. And just because you don't understand doesn't mean you're doing something wrong either. People have a need, and if it's not yours, don't worry. If you find it later, then it's all there for you. The forum has been going for some while now, so that's searchable. You can always ask in the forum. If you do get stuck and you want to use the forum, something I would, a couple of thoughts is, one, if you're able to make a very small Tinderbox file that shows literally just the problem you've got, so not necessarily everything you've you've collected, but just something that shows the problem. It's often very easy for experienced users. Oh, right, yeah, it's this. It might be as simple as something in a bit of action code, or it might be something more structural in the way you lay things out. But if you're able to give effectively a reference, then A, people can see what you're doing, and B, like as not, someone will be able to sort of edit it, put it back up for you, and you can get going from that. So that's been
and on that note, let me interject on that. Really take a step back and don't, when you're trying to isolate start with what you want, what your outcome is, what your objective is, what problem you're trying to solve, not how you're trying to solve it. Because one of the nice things with the toolbox like Tinderbox, if there's one way to do it, there's probably 10. And some can be more efficient than others. Sometimes you just need to get the work done in the moment, and so you'll take an inefficient way to go about doing it. It might not be elegant, it might be a little bit complex, but you'll get the job done. Other times you can find this like real, so like for example, for me in managing imagery within and media assets within Tinderbox, I started with about 200 lines of code and I'm down to 50, right? But that took me a while to learn that process, but both worked. It's just the elegance that you get to simplicity through you get to elegant simplicity through complexity sometimes.
Yeah, on a similar note, something that will be familiar to long-standing attendees here is that another thing that's very common when you're starting this tool, indeed many others, is to start from the premises, why isn't this like the thing that I understand better? It's a bad rabbit hole to go down because effectively it never ends well. Embrace the tool for what it is. If it works differently to something you're used to, that can be a useful question to ask. So when I do X, I'm used to doing this, then that, then something else. But Tinderbox appears to do it differently, and I don't understand. That's a sort of tractable question where people can, I think, give you some quite cogent answers. And like anything, you will find yourself doing some things in a different way. But it's there for us all. We tend to get habituated to the tools we use the most, and in our mind's eye, that becomes the way to do it, which of course is actually just not true. There are many ways to do a job. And it's as true with Tinderbox as it is with other things. So that's worth bearing in mind. I have been trying whilst it's been going on. I will post a list of videos.
I found it. I posted it.
I'll put it in the chat. Oh, you've got it. Okay, fine. But otherwise, the one last thing I'd say about ATBRef is it is a hypertext. There are lots of links, and the the encouragement to the reader is please follow the links. It's not possible to make every link that somebody might want, but I've tried to do it in a fashion where you should be able to sort of follow through to find the bit you're looking for. In other words, if you need to know more about this. So a common thing, for instance, is that lots of properties or sort of configurations in your Tinderbox file are often stored in an attribute, in a system attribute. Now, that might be unguessable at the start, but if you look it up, you'll probably find where it is. So if, for instance, you wanted to change that, it'll help you finding it. And again, if you get stuck, do ask in the forum. I think we're a fairly friendly crowd. Most people seem to get some help quite quickly.
Perfect. Is that helpful, John?
Yep, it is. The trouble is we all learn in different ways. And for me, I'm struggling at the moment because we've got that lovely, I presume lovely, manual that's available with 9.2, I think it is. Yeah, 9.2. Except I'm struggling with my eyes in seeing the damn thing because it's too small. So it's things like that come along all the time. And
I have a possible solution for that. The PDFs, if you've got one of the PDFs are actually made, as it happens, by exporting the Tinderbox file, both in terms of the app help and indeed ATBRef, into a massive, massive HTML file. The kind of thing we couldn't do 20 years ago, we can do now. It might be easier for you if it's a sort of hard of seeing problem. Possibly what we could do is fix you up with the HTML file, because then you can tweak the CSS, and if you want, and then just make it a comfortable size to your eyesight. I entirely understand the problem you're dealing with, and that's probably more tractable than playing around with a PDF.
Yeah, that would be fabulous. Also, the fact that I'm in England and we don't do the same size of paper as people do in the USA. So my manual,
Well, that won't matter if it's a web page.
My manual, when it printed out, doesn't have any page numbers.
That's fine. Well, don't worry. Because if you have the HTML page, basically you'll be able to, if you
HTML,
you'll be able to open that in Safari or whatever, and all the links should work, because suffice it to say, a bit of Tinderbox export magic has made that possible. I suspect for the problem that the issue you're raising, that is probably more use to you than playing around with a PDF. And as it's a web page, you don't have to worry about page length. And if you want to print it out as a PDF, you can actually do that if you just tell Safari or your browser to print it.
Yeah, and I need to, because the other thing is I'm struggling on screen because of dry eye. It's
no, understood. No, well, all these things are fixable, and I'm sure we can do that. I'll look into getting you. I can, because I basically write ATBRF, I can definitely do that for ATBRF. I might need to just check where we are with the master for the help file, because occasionally we just need to check some of the export templates. But suffice it to say, I do think we have a solution for your problem.
Yeah. Anything would be great help. Great stuff.
Why don't we agree on this? When you've got that, Mark, you'll post a post in the forum, and maybe John, you can keep an eye out for the forum. So once that post goes up, you've got your answer.
Yeah. Bill.
Perfect. Okay, now who wants to be the next guinea pig? Detlef, Chris, or Paul Christie? Who wants to go first?
Glad to.
All right, you're up.
All right. Just morning, everybody from Oregon, USA. Just a little bit of background about me. I've been using Tinderbox for 2+ years. Spent about a year doing other things and dipping in and taking all of Michael Becker's videos and reading the manual and doing Tinderbox way, and just kind of absorbing functions, but not really applying a lot of them. Somehow in the last year, Tinderbox, with that background, has been the solution to just about every problem I come across. And so I do really simple things. These are not technically wizardry, but they solve problems for me every week. And so to demonstrate one of them that came up this week, I'll bring up a Tinderbox file. Can I share the screen?
You can.
Does that work? Let's see. I'm not seeing a share screen button here.
Green button in the middle.
Oh, there it is. Sorry. There we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
All right. So I'm retired after about 40 years working for the federal government. Now I spend all my time on about 4 different nonprofit boards, and they eat up a lot of time. And most of my time during the week is either in person or increasingly Zoom meetings. And what usually happens, I love the Douglas Adams quote, all these meetings whiz by and you're on to the next thing, and you haven't captured anything that's gone on behind you. So I've increasingly tried to capture meetings that occur either physically or on Zoom in either a voice memo or the Zoom transcript or the Zoom MP4 that gets created. Download those. And so I'll briefly take you through how I use Tinderbox with those. And this is just coalesced in the last week, so it's kind of fresh. I'm gonna share my screen with a different program first of all here. Hang on. I stumbled upon about a year ago a program called Mac Whisper. I know there's lots of them for different platforms, but Mac Whisper is one that I really enjoy and gotten good at. I transcribe podcasts, I drag and drop MP4 and voice memos onto this, and it does a really good job in a very short amount of time of just transcribing into digital text everything that's on the voice file. And so you see along the left-hand side here, I transcribed one this week that I'll demonstrate for you. If you're not familiar, there's about 120 lifelong learning institutes around the U.S. associated with universities that are funded by the Osher Foundation, probably 30 years old at this point. And I belong to one and am treasurer of one at the Southern Oregon University nearby here. So I do a lot of meetings that are related to that. This past month, I've had one long critical meeting that was our finance committee to manage the $500,000 in revenues we have. And so I created a voice memo file of that and dragged it into MacWhisper, and it created a fairly large file of the word by word transcript of it. Kind of daunting. So when you read about it, you see things like yeah, which is a typical, conversation. What I do to manage this, and I hit on this just within the last month, I drag all that into MacWhisper. I let it do its thing and create the transcript. I copy it to the clipboard, and then I jump back over to my copy of Tinderbox, and I just dump it into a new file. And so what you see here is a file that I worked on for maybe a week off and on to get it to the point I like. There's a lot of things that I learned only from Michael Becker, so hat tip there. Every file that I grab all the hints, I grab all the templates, prototypes, etc., because of course it makes everything easier. But essentially, what you're looking at, and this is the real thing, there's nothing secret or confidential in here. I drag the entire transcription into a note. Then I look and I try and figure out what kind of attributes I'm going to need. And then I use the amazing explode feature, note explode feature, which nobody else seems to have in any other program. And I break it out into individual notes, which you can see here in blue. Every individual note is one piece of that transcript that's in a byte size that I can figure out how to assign some attributes for. So, I like to assign an attribute for the speaker, who said this note. If there's any terms.
Hey, Paul, before you move on, listen, that you got a lot going on, so I want to slow down a little bit. So first and foremost, MacWhisper, is that the good what is it? Good snooze, gumroad.com. Is that the right tool?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure people don't lose that. And then two, when you say explode, can you explain like what delimiter are you exploding this text on? Is it exploding by line, exploding by topic? How are you going about that process?
Sure, very simple. Again, I've deleted it just for ease of reading, but the entire MacWhisper digital file was copied into the text area of this transcription note. And then I take and I hit explode. In this case, I've learned to do some very sophisticated things for me, but I just broke this on paragraphs. So every paragraph or every statement in the transcription became a new note underneath transcription. I then drag those and indent them underneath the transcription notes so that I've got essentially everything that's a paragraph within the transcription as a separate individual note. And explode, of course, does that instantly and very quickly. I realized then that every one of these transcriptions needs a prototype. And I play with that back and forth. The prototype that I use here is just note, and the note is something I just want to know the system attributes, when it was created and modified. I have a reviewed date field that I created for if I go back and I take a look at it. Participants is anybody who participated in the conversation. Speaker is really important because I want to attribute whoever said that transcribed note to the note itself. From Michael Becker's kind of lessons, I know how to write a function that takes any terms that I want to assign to this note and pulls them out into separate resource notes. That's been very helpful. Committees that are there. I'll talk about export templates if we want to, but I found it very helpful to know what the path is and just certain things that help me as I'm learning and implementing this. So I assign an attribute to all these different elements, and that allows me to use a feature that I really like within Tinderbox. Is I'm going to bring up through pressing Control 1, I'm going to bring up um, the settings here, and I like to create, once I have an attribute, a display expression that's different from the note title. And in this case, I just have a simple display expression that takes the name of the note and concatenates it to whoever I've assigned as the speaker. And that's extremely helpful because that means I can run along here and have every one of my notes have whoever said that note in parentheses afterwards, and that's very helpful to me. So I can know who said what. It's kind of like a transcript of a speech. You suddenly hear a conversation, you suddenly have all this insight. Then as I progressively elaborate this collection of several hundred notes of items that were in the transcript, I create topic headings. And the topic headings are here in red. I just kind of assign, what was going on in a couple of these transcript notes into a heading. And the heading note has a different display expression and a different prototype. This one, I just put the child count as a number of comments that are included in it. So just little things that help me organize the notes. And as a result, I have this entire listing of headings and comments within the transcript and who said those comments. And it creates an easy to read document, which anyone who gets this, and I'll talk about that briefly, anyone who gets this in an email, for example, can follow through and search if they want or do anything with it. I write a couple of macros. I like to write macros, such as if there's something I consider a key thought, I pull that out. I like to have comments by the different speakers. And if I have a task or a to-do that's in any one of the comments, I note that with a task prototype and pull that out into an agent. So that's helpful. And then I add some other related topics. These are the terms, any terms that are pulled out within the comments or other committees that are just resources. I won't spend a lot of time on that. What I did this week, which is enormously helpful, is once you organize all of your information, and this is a pretty simple structure of organization, the next question is, somebody's going to want to get this. People in my world tend to ask for a Word document, which I absolutely hate, so I don't fulfill those requests, but I will send out an email of the entire transcript or create a PDF of it. And my favorite thing, now within Tinderbox that I've gotten pretty good at is just to use export templates to reformat the data. So this week, my big thing was I created an export template to preview the entire transcript. And I used, I'm going to get kind of deep here, but I used CSS notes to format that. And that gives me the ability to create an entire transcript broken out into easily readable bytes. I can then select this entire thing, paste it in an email, and send it to everybody who's asked for it. And they get an email with a rich text attachment, which essentially has all of this work. All this takes me about an hour to do. So rather than piece through a Word document where I'm getting review comments and pulling my hair out, Tinderbox has basically made me look extremely productive.
So Paul, this is awesome. Can I couple comments for you? Any other comments or thoughts or ideas before we move on?
No, that's
right.
That's it.
So a couple of comments. One is, let me know if you want on a sidelines, we can install Pandoc on your machine and you could actually produce Word files immediately from this. And then you could actually be sending
cool.
people Word files without having to do anything. Two, let me show you a little trick. Click on text. Click on the text panel. Get out of preview. Click on text. Yep. Yeah. And if you don't mind, go ahead and click on the displayed attributes.
Get out of here.
Right?
Yep.
No, open it up. No, I want you to add a couple attributes.
Okay.
All right. Add an email and add in email subject. And add an email template too.
Okay.
Okay, okay, and email.
Oh, email. Gotcha.
Okay. Now do me a favor, click command. Okay. All right, so you're just using your HTML template. So go ahead where it says templates.html page. You're you're right there.
Template
You're
right here.
yeah, yeah. Copy that and copy that in double click into there and copy that into your email template. Okay,
Okay.
and in email subject, go ahead and hit test email. And for fun right now, why don't you just type in the email address, type foo@bar.com. Okay. And why don't you hit a is it semi? Yeah, hit a semicolon
After this.
and type, foo2@bar.com. Okay. Now hit the email button. Whoops, you're not sharing screen anymore.
What happened here? Did it go to my mail file? Looks like it closed. Uh-oh, closed. It closed Tinderbox. Maybe I've got too much going on here. All right, I'm back open again. See. I got to reshare things. Something. Oh, it didn't save anything.
It didn't save. We got it before it crashed before it saved. Sometimes that
All right.
happens. Not
Well, why don't you just describe what we're talking about? I can
so
try that later.
essentially, what that will enable you to do is email out of Tinderbox. So you don't even have to go to.
Oh, so I wouldn't
and-
have to copy and paste and send
Right.
another email. Ah,
Correct.
beautiful,
And,
beautiful.
and let me show you and let me share a screen real quick and I'll show you that. Let me find my Tinderbox file. And for the kind of work that you're doing, this becomes really, really powerful. And then what you're able to do then too is actually turn your Tinderbox file into a local CRM for each of your different each of your different working groups. So let me get my Tinderbox open here. There it is.
Yeah, that'd be enormously helpful. But kind of as you see from this what happened here, I started out with a very simple idea. Dump a transcript file into text, and then through thinking through all the things I could do with it, some simple ways to use Tinderbox, it became very productive in a very short amount of time.
So I'm organizing an event in London on May 21st. And you'll see I have a whole bunch of different communication I've been doing with people and working on the event. And let me
Beautiful.
grab one of them. So if I go up here, let's see, I'll grab Michael Power. Here we go. So I said, hey, Michael, great conversation. Things were going awesome. And now if I go ahead and click his email, that will open up my Mac Mail and give me an email.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this too is what you're seeing here. The text is that text you're seeing right there, but you're saying, well, where's all of this coming through? Well, I have a template that says when you produce the email, I've got a thing called inclusion ID. So I can put the ID notes separated by a semicolon of all of the notes I wanted to attach at the end of the email as additional appends to the end of the email. So I can ultimately start including anything at the end of any email that I want. And it can be multiple emails, multiple people. And then if you notice what I'm doing here, for the different types of things I'm doing for the event, like general communications, speaker outreach, sponsorship, I'm doing different types of on ads. So I can tweak the HTML email template, the subject line for each of these different types of methodologies. And then the last thing I'll show you which is really fun. And I tried to demonstrate this a few weeks ago, and I had screwed something up, so I wasn't successful in showing you all. But I got it figured out, and I'll show you what I did wrong. I have hundreds and hundreds of people that I need to interact with when I'm doing this. So I'm going to my email now, and I'm going to randomly grab somebody's email address from my, yeah, let's grab this one. So I'm going to randomly, so here's an email I've been working with my event. So I'm going to randomly grab this guy's email from his email here. So let's say I want to go and I want to send this gentleman email. I'll go ahead here. I'll type in my email address and I'll say, just call it test email for now. Now, like yourself, I want to be able to create I want Tinderbox to help me create additional notes and essentially generate the CRM utility for me. So I created a thing called string recipient and string email. So if I paste in an email address that I've copied from a note or from an email, and then I click away and then come back, Tinderbox on it, I have a function that automatically takes that string recipient name, parses out their email address, parses out their name. But what it also does is it actually creates an individual note for them and populates their email address field. So then in the future, if I ever now want to email this person again, I don't have to do it. I don't have to paste in their email again because they're now part of my program. Now I can just type his name. I don't know, what was this? I don't remember the spelling of his name. There it is. And it's the little umlaut thingy. Let me just grab this name because I don't have the, right? So he automatically comes up. Now I can just select him. And now when I click away, you'll see that his email address is automatically populated because he's already a resource in my file and he's automatically getting linked to this note. So that way too, when I do this, if I go click on that person and I jump to his name now, scroll down to the bottom here. Come on. You'll also be able to see that I can then look at every email I've ever sent him. So it becomes a really, really powerful personal CRM utility for the types of projects that you're working on.
Beautiful.
And as I was explaining it a couple weeks ago, here's the area that I screwed up when I was doing this. Here's my on-visit email template. So in this code, what I'm having Tinderbox do is saying if the string recipient has an @ sign in it, I want you to go out and parse that out. And then I want you to create that note and populate the email field within that note using the string email address. And then I want you to clear out string email. And the reason why this broke a few weeks ago when I was trying to do that is I had this clearing out function above this line. So what was happening was Tinderbox was doing what I asked it to do, and then I'd have it clear out the information I needed for the next step.
Yeah.
So simply by just moving that data down one low, to the point where Tinderbox could grab the information it needed, and then I cleared out the chaff that was unnecessary in the process, and then it goes through the rest of the process and managing the notes.
Beautiful.
So really, really, really powerful for the type of work that you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So ping me offline and we'll happily, share some of this with you.
Yeah, probably for you, just not this week, right?
But just not this week. I need to get through next Saturday. But yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anything else you want to share in your demo, or are you good?
No, it's good. Good.
Okay. Mr. Detlef, you're on deck.
Okay, different thing I would like to show. It's I was playing around with I'm using OpenAI, the artificial intelligence stuff for several reasons, and I would like to integrate it more into my Tinderbox environment. And what they did lately was they announced a new API called the Assistant API. And this is very powerful and a very nice interface for us to use it in Tinderbox. And what I would like to show you today, I give you a very, very quick introduction about what is the Assistant API of OpenAI, that you just, if you don't know it, have an idea what we are talking about. I have to show you my desktop. Yes. And if you, I don't think all of you already played with OpenAI so much. So I just show you a little bit their tools outside of Tinderbox. And what you have here is that's a documentation you need to look into the documentation for sure. And this is this assistant API. It's still in beta. It's very new, but it's really nice to use it. And what you also have here outside of Tinderbox is what they call a playground. You can play around with the API, or you can play around with the AI stuff very easily here and test it and play around, so you know that it's working the way you like to work, to have it to work. What they did with the assistant API, it's very simple. If you think about, I think most of you already saw the ChatGPT interface. You have a chat, you ask the API, the large language model question, and it will answer it for you and will try to solve your problem. And this conversation with a machine, with a large language model, it's called a thread. And this thread, and if you talk to the machine, to the AI interface, it will try to solve your problem. For example, if you ask it, what was the last president of the United States, he will try to solve this. And the engine who is solving your issue, the large language model you're using, this is called parts of it are called an assistant. The assistants can have abilities. For example, you can make an assistant that is extracting keywords from a text, or you can create an assistant that will create a summary from a text you give it. And you also can attach tools and files to this assistant. For example, you can, that's the next thing I will do with Tinderbox, is you can add notes to this assistant. So you fine tune the artificial intelligence model with your own content, so that it will not answer based on the stuff they already had there, but based on the informations you pass to them from your own content that you have in your Tinderbox world. And the thread is the whole conversation with the machine, with the AI stuff, and it contains of messages, and the assistants are the instructions are most the instructions that will interpret the messages you send them. And the last thing is you have runs. A run is nothing more than you send a message to the system, and then you create a run naming a specific assistant to interact with the message you send to the system, and then you get an answer if the run is completed. And that's what I try to build with Tinderbox. And so let's just jump into the demonstration. I will post this file to the forum afterwards. And I created, I hate it, but I created a README file that will explain what I'm doing here. This is not a final solution. It's just the base to work with OpenAI if you like to work with it. So here,
and Detlef, before you move on,
for sure.
When you're passing your own personal or local data up, you want to be careful that there's nothing proprietary in that, because you're essentially giving your data
for sure.
up to OpenAI. So I just want to make sure that
very good,
that.
very good statement. Yes, for sure. It's always, if you play with it, you have a special safety best practices and stuff like that. You have to You have to always think about that you're using an API, you're sending stuff away, and the stuff will be on an external machine for sure. Yeah.
Right. Now, having said that, going back to the comment earlier for Bry, the AI guy, on June 1st, Bry is going to teach us how to do that on our local machine. So it's not actually going up to a third-party server like OpenAI.
Yeah.
But it's just a really important point.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, but it's a different story. I played with the model creating machine on my Mac a lot, and there you can do a lot of nice things too. But it's much more complicated than using an AI system.
for sure.
That's there. Okay,
For sure.
so here in my library, you have a set of functions. It's quite long. To interact with the assistant API of OpenAI. Everything is there you need. There's everything, but if you really want to use it, you have to modify those basic functions to fit to your needs. So what we have to do is I have a preference. I'm doing it like Michael. I always have those preference files here. These nodes store important informations and persist those informations so I can retract them later. For example, you always need to tell the OpenAI what model you are working with. I'm always using, at the moment, I'm using 3.5. The newest model is 4.0, but it's much more expensive because you need an account with OpenAI to play with them, and the price is related to the amount of text you're sending to the machine and what you're getting back. They're calling it tokens. GPT 4.0 is much more expensive than this, at least about 10 times more expensive. And GPT 3.5 will do most of the stuff you need normally if you're using an AI system. And here are several attributes I'm using. They are important. Very important is the OpenAI key. You need to register on their side to get a key. Without the key, the demo will not run. And when I upload it, I will delete my own key. So you need your own OpenAI key. Otherwise, it will not work. Okay. And then what I did, and all the stuff you need is here. I also have a very small thing as called a debugger, and I have my showstopper is nothing else. I really like the function Mark built into Tinderbox called show. It will open a small box here in the left lower corner, and I use it to communicate from Tinderbox with the user that he's working, because most of the action going on with OpenAI is asynchronous. It's not real time. You don't wait until you get an answer. The answer will come sometime, and I need to know when the answer is there. And I use this show event a lot to tell me what's going on. And I will clear this. And for example, just to start, I already created a thread. That's one stamp here. You have a stamp called create thread. That's the first thing you do. And the thread ID is stored into this attribute. That's very important. That's the conversation with OpenAI. It's a thread, and I have an ID for this thread, so I can communicate with this thread. You can have as many threads as you like if you have different things going on. And then in this thread, I have two sample assistants here. The first one is a keyboard checker. And here's what I would like the system to do. The description is, hello, you are the assistant and you are good in extracting the most relevant keywords out of a given text. And what I exactly wanted this assistant to do is written down in the text of the notes. The second assistant, I called him Sumerian, call him whatever you like. And this one can write short and easy to read summaries of a long text. That's what I really wanted to do, because I show you a real world example. That is what I need. I need to normalize long or short text to have a more or less compact version of the original text. And so what I do next is I tell him, okay, use the stamp and create an assistant. The new assistant is created. You see down there, I do the same with the Sumerian. Stamp, create assistant. Okay. Now they're there. they have an ID, the assistant ID, and now I can call this assistant ID. I can pass over a message and tell him, for example, I can use this text, just a demo text. I can use the stem and say, okay, create a message. Now the message is sent to the system, new message created. And now I can, for example, use my Sumerian and say, okay, run with this assistant, do a run with this assistant. Now the run is created and it will take some time. Everything in this demonstration file is going out to this debug message. I'm not creating any nodes or anything like that. All the output I get back from the system will go to this node. You have to look into the debug node. I clean it. Let's see. Yes, now the AI run has completed. Let's look into the debug, and there we have it. Last value is this one. So I got a 150 words maximum short version of this text. You see? That's the result of the AI doing my thing. For what I could do here, I have another text, another one, create a message. And now I use the keyboard checker just to show you something. Telling run. Okay, new run has been created. We have to wait until the system finishes. Normally it's fast. Completed, and now let's look into the debug. And here we have it. We have the most relevant keywords of the text. And the nice thing with assistants is you can have many assistants work on your message. Not only one, you can combine them. And also the assistants know of the whole thread. So if you add more than one message, you can also ask an assistant to work on all the last messages you sent to the system, not only the last one. And last but not least, I show you what I'm using it for.
And Detlef,
yeah.
I use ChatGPT not almost every day. And so it's just to emphasize on that point. So you could say, it comes back with an answer, the sky is blue. And then you could just simply say, well, why is it blue? And it will know the context that it's sky. Right. So
that's why the thread is persistent. It's still there, and the whole conversation is still there. So you can run different assistants one after another. But there's a bug. For example, if I add a message and then run one assistant on the system, and then run the second assistant on the system, I will still get an answer of the first assistant I attached to this message. But I think this is a bug in the system currently. For example, I can show it to you. That's a very short message. Okay, do I have a longer one? Okay, that's a very long one. Stem, I create a message. Message has been created. And now as the first assistant using on this message, I use my Sumerian and run it. Okay. The message has been created. Let's see whether it finished. Yes, it finished. Let's see. Okay. Here I have a short version of this very long text. Everything is... And now it's still the last message. This one is still the last message in my thread. And now I use the keyboard checker and say, okay, let's run this one also on this last message. The run has been created. We have to wait. I think it's finished. Yes. And now that's a show version. Now it worked. Normally, I would not get the keywords here, but a summary. Because he's using not the wrong assistant, not the assistant I'm using, but the other one around. That's not 100% correct at the moment, but it's a beta version. You have to play around with it, and it's also
now is that an issue with OpenAI, or is that an issue with your code?
No, with OpenAI.
Got it.
I hope so. Yeah. And if you have to, and if you working on it, what you have to do is, for example, I do have here, those are all people from Portugal who discovered the New World. And I'm working into colonialism currently. And the text I got for all those, it's German, sorry, the text is in German, but they are very different from the length. And I would like to have a more compact version of those version of the text. So what I did here is I have to go to my AI preferences and turn them on. I just turn them on. And now you will see, zack, he's adding more to come here. And something's going on. He's much too fast. Very fast today. I will stop it. So, and now he should, it's not working. There's a bug. And he will extract the text and the keywords of all those, you see it here. And it's running with its own system. I created a small script here that is checking, okay, is already a thread running, is a run running, and is something going on? And then it will automatically add new run and with a specific assistant to work on all those files. For example, if you have a large Tinderbox file and you would like to process all your nodes, you need something like this. But that's not part of my demonstration file I will upload. It's just that you have to modify the code. For example, right now here, everything is going out to my debug node. You will have to change it that it's going into your own nodes or into attributes or whatever you like to do with it. Here, that's it. It's very nice to play around with it. It's working quite well already. What OpenAI is offering us, and it's very cheap. They don't you don't have to pay very much for using it, and I think there's a great potential to work with Tinderbox together with OpenAI and to improve working a little bit what Paul showed us with his McWhisper approach. And McWhisper also uses OpenAI in the Pro version, if you like, for example, for translation of the text from one language into another. And you could use this the same way in Tinderbox. David, you raised your hand a long time ago.
Yeah, is the assumption that keywords have a singular meaning? Is there any effort to disambiguate that? I mean, this is I cannot speak of German, but I assume it's relatively the same. But English tends to have multiple meanings.
Yeah.
Is there any, so that's my impression is the large language models do not address that kind of thing.
No, they don't. Not really. The nice thing with the assistant framework is because I run into exactly this issue. The keywords didn't have the quality I expected because I use the keywords to relate files, nodes to each other. And if the keywords are not correct, my links will fail and it will not work. And the nice thing with the assistant framework, instead of using the OpenAI API directly, is that you can fine tune the answers. For example, you could try, I didn't solve it until today, but you could extract the keywords assistant into multiple steps. And this way may improve the quality of the output. And this is one reason to use the assistant framework instead of using the OpenAI chat framework directly, because you have this history and you can ask more than one question. And with the prompts of OpenAI, it's always a good idea not to overload the command you write into your assistant. Instead of putting too many instruction into one prompt, it's better to ask more than one prompt after each other, and to specify to try to narrow down the answers, to work on what he gave you. And also, what I didn't show you today is, because I played with it not so much, is where do we have it? Functions calling. No, you can fine tune. They also count here fine tuning. You can try to improve the model you're working on. And this is what I would like to try to do, to train the model with my own content. And I think this would improve my keyword problem a lot. But it's very basic. You have to use GPT-4, more expensive. And I also have a limited time to work with it, but it's really fun to work with it. And Tinderbox is a very nice interface. Most of the stuff I did with curl, so I'm always constructing commands. But you have all the commands you need for this assistant framework. They are already there. They're all working. They're all tested. What you need to improve is the communication to your Tinderbox file. You can call those all what I have here, but you need to improve the communication with your nodes, with your own knowledge framework you build into Tinderbox. That's the stuff you have to improve, and then it's fun to play with it. It's really fun.
So you have to understand what you're talking about. That's sarcasm.
Kind of. Yeah, that's it. And
Awesome.
it wouldn't work if Mark had been very, very fast in solving a problem with the JSON parser. Otherwise, we wouldn't see it. Thank you very much, Mark.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for that. Anybody have any questions for Detlef? All right, we will look forward to seeing the.
I've got
the post.
a very quick one. I'll phrase this carefully because I don't want it to sound as a negative, but what process do you use to check the quality of the AI summaries? Because one of the things that I'm finding as I play with it is it works against me in that I always get an answer and the answer looks grammatical and it looks complete. The one thing it doesn't tell me is whether it's made up all the answers. So do you have a process, a sort of checking process, or do you just trust?
No. I check them manually. I know the text I'm working with very, very well, and it's always, the quality is fairly good, I would say. And the text I'm working with is very specific. It's from a historian, and he's writing not very prosaic stuff, but for example, for me, it's important to have all the names he mentioned, to have cross-references. For example, if Columbus traveled with another guy named Bernstein, I really would like to know that he's in there. And this is working very well. But sometimes, for example, I had one, this guy was on his way to India, and he discovered a long part of the coast of the Red Sea. And the text OpenAI sent me back was, yes, after the traveling, he also discovered a coast or something like that. It was completely nonsense. You always have those sentences in the summary. I check them, I cross-check them, but it still helps me to have them, because it's just, that's also, I'm using OpenAI also for programming, and you always need to know what you're doing. That's very important. If you work with the OpenAI, you really need to understand the text, or for example, you need to understand the programming language you're asking OpenAI to give you a function. But it helps in, for example, it's like Google Plus. It's getting you a very far way in doing time-consuming manual work. But the fine-tuning, the creativity is still on your side.
Yeah, interesting. I found that actually this morning. I was using OpenAI to help me interpret some statistics for my dissertation. And it was giving me generalized responses that directionally helped me get to the answer I was looking for. But if I didn't know that's what was happening, I could have just copied and pasted and used it thinking that that was the right answer, as opposed to knowing, okay, it was generally kind of pushing me in the right direction. And I think you kind of, my one of my dissertation committees suggested to me, treat it like your really smart friend that, depending on the nature of the topic you're talking about, could either be 75% accurate and 25% bullshitting, or 50-50 bullshitting accurate, or 70-30 bullshitting accurate. It just depends on the topic and your level of knowledge, but there's always a little bit of BS in there.
Yeah,
Or it could be
Careful of
high.
it. What?
Or it could be high.
Or it could be high. Exactly. Yeah. Right. But nonetheless, it's still really valuable, because if you're stuck and you need somebody to bounce an idea off of, it's 24/7 available for you to bounce an idea off of. And that, that helps you solve the blank page problem. At least I found a lot in terms of kicking off some thinking. Awesome. Thank you. All
You're
right,
welcome.
Mr. Bernstein, I think we're up to you. What do you got? You got a new
Okay.
toy to show us today?
Yeah, I've got a new toy. It may not actually happen, but let's see if that works. Okay, so little parable of development. Thursday, I started this project to deal with something that's been on the spike for 2 years and several months. I know this because Tinderbox timestamped the note when I put it onto the spike. So Thursday morning, I say, let's actually take a day and see if I can finally do this. And it actually seemed like this should be straightforward, no problem. By midday, well, it works, but as soon as I reload the note, it's gone. And so this is the time when you ask Stack Overflow. And it turns out that while the part of OS 10, formerly OS X, that I'm using has been there since the beginning, so it's more than 20 years old, there's almost nothing about it in Stack Overflow. So yes, we're doing stuff that hasn't been done very often. And try Google. There's one really old post that has a really crazy, ugly way of doing it. And it works until I save, and then it doesn't work anymore. So by Thursday night, I'm reaching for my brand new book, Oh Shit Git, which is highly recommended. It was mentioned at a previous meetup. And it's like a short comic book for getting out of a mess with the version control system that just about everyone uses. It's hilarious and it really is good. So rewind the whole thing, throw out everything from the day. I do this maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, but this is really exceptionally bad. Friday morning, I say, okay, there was 20 odd years ago a programmer at Apple who thought that this was a sensible way to do it. So what were they thinking I would do that would make this make sense? And I took a guess, and by Friday evening, I had a actual working prototype. Placeholder didn't do anything, but like it did get saved with the file. So I think I've got it. And then Saturday morning, I take a look at this wonderful 2 days work, and it really is quite horrible. And we have all sorts of classes that are fiddling with the insides of other classes. So though I wasn't planning on programming Saturday, I spent a long day getting it back into something like decent shape. So what is it? it's something that keeps getting requested from people who keep not buying Tinderbox, and I'm interested in having people buy Tinderbox. And it's just this, being able to put check marks into Tinderbox notes on the text side. And you go and you insert a checkbox, and there's a checkbox, and you can check it and uncheck it. But as long as we're doing this, and I mean, believe me, this was an utter bear. But we could do something else with the same facility, really. This is a expression that's been inserted into the text, and you click on it, and if I change it, it now says $name, $name. But if I do $name uppercase, it uppercases the name. Or I can do arbitrary string manipulations, and various other things. And I suspect that this is going to be really useful, though I don't know precisely how. Which is why I'm breaking the rule about talking about things before they're real. If you have ideas for what you absolutely need to make use of this, go ahead and send me email. And with luck, it'll get into the next Backstage release. There are still headaches and documentation, bulletproofing, but I think it's going to work.
And with like 2 sentences, can you summarize what it is in a different way? Like, what do you think?
Well,
what is the it?
2 things. The first thing is you can put checkboxes into notes, and you can check and uncheck them. The second thing is you can put a element into the text of a note that is the result of evaluating a Tinderbox expression. So you could say instead, show me the height of this note. Oh, so you can take anything that you can compute in a Tinderbox expression and have that inserted. One way to think about it is we currently do a lot of this using what I think of as the Michael Becker technique of writing a HTML template and then previewing the note to see the result of caret value of some property. This is letting you do caret value inside the text of the note instead of in a template.
That's really cool. Yes.
So
Okay,
how
now-
would
now I
you,
get it.
how would you, what's the UI for inserting an expression in $ text?
You say insert expression. This is
Ah.
probably going to be a submenu, and it's initially height, and we say width instead, or whatever.
So could you have a number of
That's so
expressions
cool.
stored in a library folder that you could call?
Yeah, you could say,
So you can call a function, is what you're
yeah,
suggesting.
you could call a function. You could probably do some strange things.
Well, I'm sure we will.
Yeah, I think this is this is really interesting. I hand down. Because my mind flew to things like Jupyter notebooks and the like, which I don't use mainly because I don't want to faff around in Python. But this gets me closer to some of the behavior that those things offer that I hadn't thought to ask for. So I find this very interesting, and I'm sure we'll quickly find new and unusual ways to torture the feature, as normally happens.
Now the expression appears in $ text, but it is an attribute in itself that you can.
No, it's not an expression. It's not an attribute. It's just a thing that's embedded in the text that knows what its expression is.
Okay, so it's not accessible anywhere else
No.
through
Well,
like.
it is, Dave, in the sense that if you've written a function, or
No,
if
no,
you've
no.
written
I'm just saying you
stamp,
can't put it. You can't call up displayed attributes. It won't appear in attribute browser necessarily.
because it's not an attribute. It's
Right.
just calling it. It's either calling the value of that attribute or calling the value of a function or an
And
a function and executing
You
it.
couldn't have an agent collect all the notes that had expressions in them.
Not at present.
So that goes back to a question I had before we get too far, is on the checkbox, is that accessible by action code or not? Give me all the checkboxes.
I am thinking about it. It isn't yet. Ask me late Monday. It's actually an interesting question because, of course, you may have several checkboxes, and we've got to figure that out. I suspect that what we're usually going to want to know is if every checkbox or any checkbox has been checked. And but I think exposing that through an attribute is the right way to do it.
Yeah, and one thing that immediately comes to mind for me is in this list of to-dos, give me a list of all the ones that aren't done. Or go and check all the ones that, or go and check them. Mr. Chuck.
So I just had a question for Mark. I'm very intrigued with this, and I'm beginning to think there are several places this might be very useful. Sort of a question of origin. There's been a lot of talk recently about some of the improvements, enhancements that Apple is working on for its Notes app. And I'm wondering if, in a way, you're trying to fill in some gaps in Tinderbox to, come closer to some of those features, or are you in any way influenced by some of the directions they're taking with Notes? And is there any overlap between what they're doing? Because your checkbox example looks like something that Notes does very easily, and that probably I could see a lot of people saying that's not something that Tinderbox could do. Whether that's true or not is
Obsidian
another
does it all the
subject.
time.
Yeah, or Obsidian. Yeah, so I'm wondering, what is the motivation that many users are saying they wouldn't buy Tinderbox because you didn't have this, and I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are as to what that motivation is all about, and whether it's due to the influence of other apps.
This one, I think, is coming more from the Obsidian people than from the Notes people, though I just did bookmark a piece about sneaky new stuff in Notes that I have to take a look at. And I'm all in favor of looting other applications and other research for good Tinderbox features. I try to avoid playing catch up with Apple because that's historically been a bad route, but certainly. And I've wanted to have the including an expression for some time. I just have a sense that will be a useful thing, and I just realized you can use it to do transclusion. You can even put the text of some other note. Now, whether we're going, formatting, that's going to be an interesting problem, but we can live with bad formatting if we absolutely need to transclude something.
Well, like going back to the example I showed earlier, Mark, in including something into an email.
Yeah.
Like if you had boilerplate information, I would absolutely be using that in my email templates.
Dave Rogers.
So what I see this as, in many cases, I have displayed attributes showing to tell me what will be exported when I don't look at preview. I mean, I do as a QA check, but I don't use it as a primary form of the interface. So what this suggests to me is that, say, on a blog post, I could have an expression that basically just displays those displayed attributes in line in the text of a note. And that is that correct? Is my
I mean, one reason this is sat on the spike for 2 years is that it is in tension with displayed attributes, which in some ways do the same thing. They take an attribute and they make it visible. They don't transform an attribute, but display expression is also in tension with it. But it might be nice if you need to summarize several things in something like a dashboard, but wants to be in text or so forth.
What I see is a prototype that, for a thing like a blog note that has a certain amount of boilerplate at the top, perhaps, that fills in all that like weather data and whatever other minutia that I try to record, and it just appears in the text of the note, which is a natural affordance, perhaps what you might expect. I'm accustomed now to displayed attributes, so this would be an adjustment. But then how would it interface with export code?
Currently it's invisible to export code, and
Correct.
I just made a note to make a note about how do these export, because that's not something I anticipated. For an export-oriented application like your weblog files, we already have include for boilerplate, which is actually a better, cleaner solution. But sometimes you aren't interested in export. You're just trying to stay on top of some information and say customer relationship system, campaign manager system, who are we going to talk to and who's going to talk to them. Things like that, where you're not particularly interested in that, but you do want to be able to gather information from other notes and bring it over here.
Well, that's where, Tinderbox as the file itself is the product. I mean, not the export product. And so like Captain's Log, I could see using some of this functionality in that application. So, but it did seem to be problematic with regard to HTML export and things of that nature.
Yeah, figuring out how to do export for this will be interesting.
Yeah, so just so we're clear then, so if I have a function pulling in a value 42 into a note, that 42 today would not be exported.
Currently, that's true.
Got it.
Mark Anderson.
So in a sort of slight segue, because fun enough, literally in the last week, I'm about to start work on sort of go-to of Ted Gorenson's blog, which I recall caused some problems for Tinderbox 5 back in the day and led to some features we now have, which is great. So I just put my head above the parapet to say that one of the things we will still be doing is stretch text, which of course it requires some automation in the browser. You can't get around that. And I only mention it here in case there's anything else that's sort of lurking somewhere on the spike, or you're having thoughts about anything to do with using stretch text. This will be in HTML. So this is, I take David's point, and it doesn't surprise me that as things start, the first thing is to do this inside Tinderbox, maybe move it outside. So I'm moving the goalpost slightly, but just to say, if there's anything about stretch text coming up, let me know, because I'm about to give that a prod again. It was interesting the last time around, and I'm sure I'll have even less hair when I finish this time.
So what was the big demand for checkboxes and $ text? I mean, can't we already put a checkbox in the outline view to the left of the name?
Yeah, well, there was a guy on the forum a couple of months ago who renewed this, but it shows up on the forum every year or so. And the people who want it badly. And I, to be honest, don't really see why, uh, but okay.
Well, I think it goes back to what Mark.
There
I
are
think-
lots of things that we now consider absolutely essential, sensible affordances of Tinderbox that I thought at first were completely silly. Grabby hand scrolling. I just hated the idea for at least a year. We've got scroll bars. Why do we need anything else?
I think it
Yeah.
goes back to what Mark Anderson said earlier before. The software that I'm familiar with is what I expect. Right. And in Obsidian, if you're a big Obsidian user, the inline checkboxes are a big deal and you just get used to it. So that's where I think that's partly where it comes from.
Well, I think the included expressions, this feature is much more intriguing. The
Yeah.
checkbox, I
Yeah,
don't
I
get.
agree.
Bill,
Hi. Um, Not that I'd use this, but I'm reacting to the comments. First one is I see the tension between displaying an attribute. I could show that 428 is an attribute or example or whatever. And for my own personal needs, that's what I'd want to do. I wouldn't use this for that. I just make an attribute and have the data that I want to see. I can do that for myself within Tinderbox. But if I wanted to show somebody, make some coherent note about my attributes, then I'd have to export it. And that's a scenario where I can see this being very useful, communicating to somebody else. I don't see it useful as communicating to myself because I can use an attribute. So, so I'm just sharing my reaction to seeing this for what that's worth.
Yeah, Bill, I completely concur with you, especially with my use case and model. Exporting, it's all about the output for me. So exporting is going to be ultimately critical, but I could see pre-uses for it definitely. Mr. Rogers.
To respond to Bill, this relieves some of the real estate tension on a laptop when you like to use suggested links, Command 7, and you've got a big stack of displayed attributes. If you could just take that data that you want in to appear somewhere in that note and just fold it into $ text, then you close all that up. I'm always kind of gauging which displayed attributes do I actually even really need, because the more there are, the lower they go. So I can see this being useful.
Okay, good
Chuck.
point.
Yeah, I just wanted, I'm amplifying on what Dave and Bill were just saying. I think the advantage of this feature and the reason that people may be asking for it so much is because it allows you to stay within the narrow confines of notes with $ text, RTF, rich text format, and immediately displayed, and yet have some degree to influence what that display is. And like Bill, I immediately jumped to this would be really helpful for certain types of documentation where somebody's going to be using the Tinderbox file for documentation. It's not so much for what you, the author, needs to put in there, but to make it very easy for the text to be automatically adjusted and manipulated for someone who's trying to interpret what's coming out of it. And again, for some of the things I'm thinking of, suddenly I'm coming up with lots of ideas of exactly that kind of issue, that when a note pops up, you don't have to do anything fancy. It doesn't have to have any large set of attributes or anything else. I can have every note have some customization built into that note that doesn't require exporting or anything else, and immediately allows me to communicate to somebody who's reading that note information that might otherwise be obtuse or difficult to obtain. So I think it has value. I'm going to have to give a lot more thought to the best ways to exploit that value, but I really think it has value. So thank you.
We will see.
Exciting. All right, and perfect timing. We've got about 30 seconds left. Anybody else have any other thoughts, ideas, topics that they want to cover today?
Sure. How many of you have been hit by this Apple ID password reset fiasco?
Not yet.
Got it.
God.
What is
Yeah.
it?
Mark, if you have any influence on Apple, time to kick their butts and say, get your Apple ID problem fixed.
Yeah,
As a security guy, I'm appalled.
yeah.
Sorry.
For people who haven't met this yet, a bunch of people are having requests to sign into your Apple ID out of the blue. And of course, you already were signed in, but everyone wants you to sign in again occasionally. But if you get this, you may find that it asks you dozens and dozens of times and or refuses to sign you in when you're quite sure you have the right keyword. And no one's quite sure what is going on. Apple is neither confirming nor denying at this point,
Right.
last I
I
heard.
suspect it's an attack.
Yeah.
No,
I-
this is not an attack. There is an attack that's,
There is a
trying to-
there is a phishing attack that's very much like this, that's
Right.
leveraging on people being inured to being asked this question. But
right. And
as in everything, stay safe out there.
Yeah, and the reality is what this does is it forces you to reset your password for your Apple ID. That's the only way to get around this problem. Apple just suddenly decides your account has been blocked for security reasons, literally what they say, and you have to change your password.
Is that for
Unfortunately,
all your IDs or just a particular one? Because
Well-
that's the other thing Apple never fixed was I seem to have about 4 different IDs. As they over the years they changed their databases and resolved.
it's per ID, Apple ID, as they define it. The problem is that when you reset your password, you wind up resetting all your app's passwords, which is a royal pain in the ass to fix. So it's clearly something that they've broken the user interface, and Apple ID has been a god awful mess from the day one that Apple's never really addressed or fixed.
Chuck, can you give an example?
Anyway,
Can you,
I'll leave it at that. Beg pardon?
can you give an example of an app's password? What's an app in iCloud?
Well, there are a couple things. There's you may log into an app on your iOS devices, and once you've logged in, you just stay logged in. It's kind of magic. However, suddenly that app doesn't work anymore because you've got to go find whatever procedure you have to go through to tell the app itself that it needs to update your Apple ID. I tried doing that, for example, with SketchUp, which is such an example. And it came back with an error saying invalid token response from IPD, which I assume is excuse me,
So the
IDP,
apps on our
which is
iPhone
the
might not-
ID provider. All this has to do with all of the federalization of passwords and various forms of authentication. And the problem is now that we've gotten so many things in the cloud and so many services we're all dependent upon, something getting broken has far more ramifications than it would have in the past. And it's not, if you lost a password for, one website, you had to reset it. Yeah, okay, that's a pain. But now then, if you've used Apple ID in any sense, according to the ways that Apple wants you to, suddenly it's a much larger problem. And so, particularly when you start introducing family sharing and other things like that. So suddenly it's no longer just you, it's lots of other people, the ones in your family. So it's I just mentioned it just out of curiosity, is how many people had encountered it. And maybe it's a little bit of a heads up that should you suddenly find yourself in that situation, accept the reality that you're probably going to have to change your Apple ID's password. Doesn't seem to be any other way around it.
All right, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.
All
a lot.
right.
Chuck,
See ya.
That's a real good, that's a nice thought.
Thank you, everybody.